Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shikodnatai Naika Shashi ki jai, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki jai, Shri Guru Rai Lal ki jai, Shri Nasindev Bhagavan ki jai, Entai Guru Prabhupada. Reading from Our Family Business, The Great Art of Distributing Srila Prabhupada's Books. Can I get a tissue, please? Thank you. Lacking money, health, and youthful energy, Srila Prabhupada ignited in America and then Europe a Hare Krishna explosion, releasing the flood of prema that would cover the world. What was his secret? How did he do it? Our Family Business tells us quite methodically how Srila Prabhupada did it. Not only does Vaisheshika Prabhu know how Srila Prabhupada did it, he teaches us how we can do it too. Can we be like Srila Prabhupada? I vividly remember when I learned the answer in the fall of 1971 when I was a brand new temple president in Philadelphia. I received a photocopied newsletter mailed out by Shyama Sundradas, Srila Prabhupada's secretary, then traveling with him in Africa. Shyamakunda recounts a particular occasion when Srila Prabhupada was reflecting on his accomplishments. They had just come from London, where Srila Prabhupada had defeated in debate the secretary of Mensa, the High IQ Society. After recalling this, Prabhupada went on to say, I am one person and just see what I have done. Now we have 500 initiated disciples. So each of you become just like me and see what can be done. To be sure, Our Family Business is written specifically as an instruction manual for book distribution, yet the work covers its subject so thoroughly and deeply that it simultaneously serves as a superb instruction manual for Krishna Bhakti itself. Even if book distribution is not your primary service, you will still find yourself enlightened, encouraged, and enlivened by reading and rereading Our Family Business. It will inspire and guide any and every devotee to improve any service he or she may undertake for Krishna. Cook, pujari, farm worker, yard worker, manager, teacher, editor, or writer, it doesn't matter. Moreover, every devotee should, in one fashion or another, share Krishna consciousness with others. Sankirtan is everyone's dharma. The radiant thread running throughout this work is the elucidation of the inseparable bond between effective book distribution and the effective execution of sadhana. That is the regular performance of the foundational spiritual practices of Krishna consciousness, following the four regular principles, chanting japa attentively, and attentive and regular reading of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and similar works. So that's by Ravindra Swarup Das. Just see from the foreword of this book. Nice. So he's describing here how by reading this book, even though this book is primarily about book distribution, then still by reading it and studying its methodology, then we can gain in all aspects of our Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki, Transcendental Book Distribution ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 18, Text 37, chapter entitled The Residents of Jambudweep Offer Prayers. Dravya, Kriya, Hetu, Ayanesha, Katribir, Dravya Kriya Hetu Ayanesha Katribir, Dravya Kriya Hetu Ayanesha Katribir, Maya Gunair Vastu Nirikshitatmane, Maya Gunai Vastu Nirikshitatmane, Anvikshayangati Shayatma, Buddhibir, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Nirosta Maya Kritaye, Namo Namaha, Nirosta Maya Kritaye, Namo Namaha, Dravya Kriya Hetvayane Shakatribir, Dravya Kriya Hetvayane Shakatribir, Maya Gunarvastu Narikshitatmane, Maya Gunarvastu Nirikshitatmane, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Narastamaya Kritaye Namo Namaha, Narastamaya Kritaye Namo Namaha, Dravya Kriya Hetvayane Shakatribir, Maya Gunarvastu Nirikshitatmane, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Nirastamaya Kritaye Namo Namaha, Dravya Kriya Hetvayane Shakatribir, Maya Gunarvastu Nirikshitatmane, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Nirastamaya Kritaye Namo Namaha, Dravya Kriya Hetvayane Shakatribir, Maya Gunarvastu Nirikshitatmane, Anvikshayangati Shayatma Buddhibir, Nirastamaya kritaye namo namaha. Dravya, by the objects of sense enjoyment. We are the activities of the senses. Hetu, the predominating deities of sensory activities. Oyana, the body. Isha, the predominating time. Kurtribi, by false egotism. Maya gunai, by the modes of material nature. Vastu, as a fact. Nirikshita, being observed. Atmane, unto the Supreme Soul. Anvikshaya, by careful consideration. Anga, by the limbs of yogic practice. Atishaya Atma Buddhi, by those whose intelligence has become fixed. Nirasta, completely freed from. Maya, the illusory energy. Akritaye, whose form. Namaha, all respectful obeisances. Namaha, respectful obeisances. Translation. The objects of material enjoyment, sound, form, taste, touch, and smell, the activities of the senses, the controllers of sensory activities, the demigods, the body, eternal time, and egotism are all creations of your material energy. Those whose intelligence has become fixed by perfect execution of mystic yoga can see that all these elements result from the actions of your external energy. They can also see your transcendental form as supersoul in the background of everything. Therefore, I repeatedly offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Please repeat. The objects of material enjoyment, sound, form, taste, touch, and smell, the activities of the senses, the controllers of sensory activities, the demigods, the body, eternal time, and egotism are all creations of your material energy. Those whose intelligence has become fixed by perfect execution of mystic yoga can see that all these elements result from the actions of your external energy. They can also see your transcendental form as supersoul in the background of everything. Therefore, I repeatedly offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The objects of material enjoyment, the sensory activities, attachment to sensual pleasure, the body, false egotism, and so on, are produced by the Lord's external energy, Maya. The background of all these activities is the living being, and the director of the living beings is the Supersoul. The living being is not the all-in-all. He is directed by the Supersoul. In Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Krishna confirms this. Sarvasya cha hangs hridi sanivishto matta smriti jnanam aponam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me become remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The living entity depends on the Supersoul for directions. A person advanced in spiritual knowledge, or a person expert in the practice of mystic yoga, yama, niyama, asana, and so on, can understand transcendence either as Paramatma or as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is the original cause of all natural events. Therefore, he is described as Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. Behind everything visible to our material eyes is some cause. And one who can see the original cause of all causes, Lord Krishna, can actually see. Krishna, the Satchitananda Vigraha, is the background of everything, as he himself confirms in Bhagavad Gita 9:10. Maya dyakshena prakriti siyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagadviparya vatate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Amagyanatamrandasya gananjana shlakaya chakshuran malitam jena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Vandeham Shri Guru Shritapadakamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahaganam Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Cha Vanchakalpatrubhya Cha Kripasindhuyeva Cha Vritanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So one thing that struck me was the nature of the translation here. That who's speaking here? I don't know who's speaking. Shukadev Goswami. Is it? Oh no. Who is the last? Who's actually speaking here? Okay, in Hiranmayavasha, the Supreme Lord Vishnu lives in the form of a tortoise. The residents of that land chant the following hymns. So, are we still on that? Oh no. Okay, no. So it's actually in the tract of land known as Uttarakuruvasha, Mother Earth and all other inhabitants worship the Supreme Lord with unfailing devotional service by repeatedly chanting the following Upanishad mantra. Okay, so yeah, Mother Earth is actually glorifying, and the rest, Mother Earth is amongst the personalities glorifying the Lord here. So Mother Earth is saying that those whose intelligence has become fixed by perfect execution of mystic yoga can see all these elements result from the actions of your external energy. They can also see your transcendental form as supersoul in the background of everything. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So Mother Earth is offering respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord because he is recognized as being the Supreme by mystic yogis. So sometimes we consider the mystic yogis to be on a lower platform than bhakti yogis, but mystic yoga actually was taught by Lord Kapila Dev to his mother Devahuti. And it's at that time in Satya Yuga, and perfect execution of mystic yoga actually is non-different from the performance of bhakti yoga. And it was interesting when we were reading there in Vrinda Swarup Prabhu's description of the book, Our Family Business, and that's what he was indicating, that actually perfect execution of one limb of bhakti yoga simultaneously makes us expert in all the different limbs. So a perfect execution of book distribution also brings about perfect execution of pujari service, of temple maintenance, interacting with guests, because the actual internal process is the same. Also, when Mother Janava Priya was giving a Bhakti Shastri class on, as far as I remember, it was chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, she was talking about how the different limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pratyahara, Dharani, Dharana, and Samadhi, how these also, even though they were originally describing the different limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, but they can also be applied to all of our devotional activities. And I don't know if we can remember, she asked us to analyze how those different limbs of Ashtanga Yoga could be applied to Pujari service or to book distribution or to gardening. And this is interesting because the Bhagavad Gita is, when Krishna is presenting the Bhagavad Gita, then he's often using military terminology because he's speaking to Arjuna about the battlefield. And so he's talking about, slay this insatiable enemy of lust. Often weapons, often the simile or the metaphor of weapons is used when describing how to control the mind. And then in other places, Srila Prabhupada will use analogies from gardening, cultivating the creeper of devotional service, cutting down the weeds. And then obviously when we're talking to people who are practicing Hatha Yoga, then we can also talk in terms of, different bodily disciplines. So the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is presenting the Bhagavad Gita, although it's using a lot of military analogies, then our acharyas will take those analogies and use them in other ways. So similarly, this is the legacy that we are inheriting from our acharyas, to learn how to use analogies that can capture people's attention. Even persons who are quite entrapped by the illusory energy, Maya, many of them are very expert in one particular field, and at least within that field, they actually have committed themselves to developing better qualities, to develop a more inclusive attitude towards colleagues and competitors, to learn from their mistakes, to see the good in others, to practice forgiveness. And especially this is more and more the case within different professions, where people in administration come together and have different trainings and different seminars where these kind of topics are covered, and where the participants actually have to do some work. And it's very similar to the work that we do in mystic yoga, you could say, or even in bhakti yoga. So, and Srila Prabhupada says here that a person advanced in spiritual knowledge, or a person expert in the practice of mystic yoga, can understand transcendence either as Paramatma or as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada said this, like Hatha Yoga, asana and pranayama is just for persons who are very much on the bodily platform, and that's actually the case. So because people are more and more on the bodily platform as Kali Yuga progresses, but still, if we can identify which aspect of their life they're expert in, then we can understand that at least in that aspect, perhaps they have an opportunity to understand that behind everything there is actually a higher cause. Expressions like everyone's on a journey, everyone's on the same page. I mean, people to be able to actually honestly say that to another person, then it requires a certain amount of humility, a certain amount of tolerance, of forgiveness. So in this way, and it also opens up the opportunity for Krishna as the super soul to teach people to make people aware of his existence. But often because of the pressure of living in the so-called postmodern world, then everyone's afraid of saying that, God spoke to them last night. So people don't use that language. People say the universe spoke to me. All right. But in Maharaj Parikshit, he also recognized that when he first met Shukadeva Goswami, so that's beginning from the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The second chapter of the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is quite difficult to understand for those of us who've primarily been brought up in the mood of Bhakti Yoga as presented by Srila Prabhupada and our recent acharyas, because the second canto is talking a lot about the universal form and about very technical aspects of the creation and different interactions of the different energies. And Gopi Prandanpru in one set of seminars on that section of the second canto explained that Maharaj Parikshit, being the emperor, understood that people having many different mentalities and different levels of appreciating transcendence, then they need a kind of portal by which they can enter into the Bhagavatam, and that even many of the sages who'd assembled to offer respect to Maharaj Parikshit as he was entering the last 7 days of his life, many of those sages who were assembled there were not Bhakti yogis, but were also mystic yogis or impersonalists, and were on different levels of understanding. So when Parikshit Maharaj was questioning Shukadeva Goswami there right at the very beginning of that Shukadev's presentation, then he's talking about different forms of mystic yoga by which the yogis progress through the different coverings of the ego. And some of those methods are very, very similar to Hatha Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. And Shukadev doesn't sort of say, oh, this is all just material, but he answers it systematically. And as we know from our studies of Bhagavad Gita, then the Bhagavad Gita can be actually understood as a treatise on Naishkama, Bhakti or Naishkama Yoga. Jnana can be understood as a treatise on Jnana Mishra Bhakti or Yoga Mishra Bhakti. And it works on that platform. So this is the amazing mystic potency of Krishna, that he can teach people on different platforms simultaneously in the same book, in the same teaching to Arjuna. Just like similarly through the Mahabharata, Srila Vyasadeva is teaching so many different groups of people in the Mahabharata, but people who are really interested in family and family intrigue, and people who are really interested in diplomacy, people who are really interested in warfare, interested in martial arts. But also within the Mahabharata, there are many, very, many deep spiritual teachings also. So it's interesting also that, I was just thinking here, Savasya Chaham Riddhi Sanavishto, Krishna said, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So one of Krishna's names is also Buri Karanaya. This means that Krishna is unlimitedly merciful, and he's always attentive to like the inner workings of the heart of all the living entities. So devotees become expert in meeting people where they're at, and having faith that Krishna's words will touch them in some way, and all really all that we need to communicate is our enthusiasm for the books that we're distributing, our enthusiasm that even though sometimes they're quite difficult to understand, but that we have faith from repeated reading of them that actually they really do communicate to us, that they do have this magical ability to cut through intellectual ineptitude that we may have to understand the Sanskrit and even to understand some of the concepts within the books. But still, because the book is written by someone who is our ever well-wisher, Srila Prabhupada and Krishna and our acharyas, then by, like it's like people would say, by the mercy of the universe, we can get something from them. So I was just thinking, actually, about 150 years ago, Western authors started writing books that were very depressing, like the existentialist Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Knut Hamsun, and then also like Sigmund Freud. Like his books are ultimately very depressing because they basically just analyze everything in terms of like man's unstoppable sex desire and like the anxiety that's caused by that. So and Sartre is talking about, and Camus are talking about that there's the only question left in like the world is, why do people not commit suicide? So intellectually, people have gone through this kind of like real depth of depression, but they've come out of it because Krishna's there in everyone's heart, and irrespective of like the trauma and anxiety of living in a world of like terrorism and animal torture and like human rights violations and climate change, irrespective of all of that, people actually do have connection with Krishna in the heart. So we can in that sense, we can actually feel that we are all on the same page, and that we are all on the same journey. And we don't really need to be afraid of like upsetting people, People that already have been upset for like 1.5 centuries, ever since mass media really came into existence, and people, irrespective of how comfortable anybody might be in their own living room, people are able to see that the impending danger is not far away. So, so I think this is a very nice verse, and especially since it's spoken by Mother Earth, and she's really saying, that anybody who really studies anything with sincerity and exhaustive attention will actually come to understand that they have a guide, that they have a personal guide within themselves. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments? So it's very enthusing to know that devotees are meeting so many interested people in the course of their book distribution. And it's, the more that people read Prabhupada's books, then the more that they'll accept that actually we are like all on the same journey, all on the same page. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Karnatai Mai Pashashi ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki.